Why, yes, I can finally confirm that I am indeed the Walrus. Welcome, good evening, ladies, gentlemen, MBs, to Warui Deshou's second stream, the last one. This is it. This is our, end of Evangelion episode. Although it's not actually on end of Evangelion, as it turns out. We're actually covering Odd Taxi. We're covering the final 5 episodes of it. And what a long and strange journey it has been indeed. But of course, along for the ride, as always, is my good friend and podcast colleague, the Subtle Doctor.
Hey, folks. I hope everybody's doing well. And all I have to say is, if only Yuki Mitsuya were here.
Yeah. I have no idea who that is. I'm so sorry.
The first cat lady that
Oh,
that
yes, of
died.
course. Sorry, I couldn't tell if you're referring to a voice actor or possibly a Japanese wrestler. I really weren't sure.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Well, I've already failed this podcast then in discussing Odd Taxi, but never mind.
Listen,
but
character
I will say
names are difficult to keep up with. So much so that I'm going to pull up a list now.
Oh boy. I mean, at this, if Odd Taxi has given us anything through its mostly sustained use of characters as animals, it's that you think you could have just said, well, the alpaca kicked the guy in the face. And people might, otherwise out of context think that was a bit strange. Like, no, it makes perfect sense. But I will, however, say ahead of time, this final episode of Odd Taxi, the pod taxi, as it were, is full spoilers, full bore, right from the beginning. Why on earth have you not already watched this show in full? If you're listening to this, what's going wrong with you? Sort it out. Anyway, because I want to say, I need to get this out here very briefly. I need to be
victory lap.
I need to be full smug ahead on this one just one last time and say that I was right. My galaxy brain actually paid off for me for once. And I'm just gonna have a cheeky victory drink. But anyway, that's beside the point because there's much more to discuss about the revelation that indeed all of the characters were human, always have been human, and it was indeed just Odokawa's way of seeing the world that presented them all as animals. So we'll come back to that later. There is a lot to discuss. We have patron questions to come. We're going to talk a bit about creatives as well. We have some talking points, some final thoughts on the series, and then some final thoughts on this series of podcasts. Right. We're gonna take a brief 5-minute diversion at the very end just to talk about the the bad times and the good times. We're having messages in the chat, by the way, Doc, that apparently we have turned into PowerPoint mode on the video.
Oh, well, like I said, I don't know why my CPU is what is using up so much of it here. Don't know that there's all that much that I can do. Maybe I will close some old Firefox tabs. I'll just sacrifice them.
I mean, I don't mind you minting Dogecoin, mate. You can go nuts with that if you want, but probably not right now. Just saying, there's a time and a place for that.
I assure you, nothing nefarious about the Firefox tabs.
I mean, if you think I'm being tangential here, that's not the last time you'll hear me talking about fake currency later. Yeah, come at me, crypto fuckers.
Oh,
I don't buy into your Ponzi scheme, unlike you, who actually literally buy into it. You morons. Sorry, just casting out a bit of shade here, because I just feel like it. But anyway, while Doc's throwing more coal into the steam engine there to get this going. Yes, this is indeed our final second stream. It's been quite the long and strange journey throughout all of it. But I am, however, going to say that I think I speak for both me and Doc that we're ending this on a high note.
Absolutely.
If anything, because we sometimes give non-spoilery summaries of our of our thoughts on the block of episodes. I'm going to tell you ahead of time because we had rated the previous blocks of episodes, and gave them both 5 out of 5. I'm not unfortunately going to give this particular block of episodies a full 5 out of 5 because I have a couple of minor quibbles. Okay. But this is probably the most consistently strongly written show I've seen in all that we've probably covered on Warui Deshou for quite a while. I'm sure if I thought about it, there'd be more examples I give of shows that I thought were overall more tightly written, but they are few and far between. That I can definitely say. And something I want to note as well, just as an aside here, is I don't know if Odd Taxi will have a lot of staying power in my mind as a work of entertainment that I will come back and rewatch over and over. And that's in no way the show's fault, I should stress. That is strictly my own like opinion.
Man.
That's like just how I that's just like how I am in terms of like, I've had my time to because on the face of it, like it is really just like a well executed mystery story, but it doesn't have any of that out there stuff that like tends to stick in my mind when it comes to anime. Like it's not say like a Land of the Lustrous, for example, or a Macross Frontier, where there's so much crazy out there shit going on. That is again not to, denigrate the show or to play it down in terms of quality. But that being said, I will, however, now use this. I will now ever use this as the gold standard, which I will compare many other shows to, because I've screamed it from the rooftops. I've screamed it from the highest mountain, the highest, everywhere, like all over the land, that I want tightly written scripts because they are the cheapest part of any given show, and I do not accept failure in making them good. It should not be difficult to write a top quality script and then animate over it, in my opinion. That's the way I operate. I'm not a Sakuga bloke. I don't believe that animation is the end all of it because ultimately it must rest on the foundation of solid writing. And I defy like anyone to find a show that is more tightly written than this, with the possible exception of stuff like Madoka Magica. Because every single piece, for the most part, is so perfectly, intricately woven together. It is like Swiss clockwork, it is that intricate. And so ultimately, while I say that the content, like the actual story, might not stick around me for a long while, I'm sorry, future anime, but you are now really up against the wall on it, because this is the thing I'm going to compare it to, because you have no excuse. No excuse whatsoever. Sorry to say.
Well, I have to say that's, man, I mean, I expected you to say the last bit about the tight writing, because I mean, I think it mostly maintains that. It definitely maintains that throughout. I'm surprised that it was not going to stick with you. Why do you think that is?
I think most of it is because when I think of like anime that sticks with me, it's usually because they have more out there concepts. Again, why I mentioned Land of Lustrous or Frontier, because they feel more like wild. And I'm not saying that what's happening on Taxi is, like milquetoast or anything. Far from it. I mean, heck, that's actually the point of one of the themes of the show, that what you believe to be around you to be, boring and ordinary is actually not. It is, as I've quoted many times, that rant from the film adaptation, so I'm not saying that at all, but rather in the limited brain space that I have, in my limited, like, internal memory, it probably won't stick with me in terms of, like, I want to rewatch this over and over again, whereas I would do with, say, Frontier or Landlust, for example. But that doesn't mean it's going to stick with me, of course, as I say, with terms of the writing. I, again, will stress it's just strictly me, But
yeah, I mean, I guess, so are you, is it a concept thing or is it a spectacle thing?
Maybe both. Possibly both thrown in together. I mean,
you're so demanding.
I think of it in the same way now that it springs to mind, of the way I thought about 91 Days. Do you remember that?
I mean, also, I remember the anime. I don't remember how you thought of it exactly, but I remember you liked it. But I certainly remember the show. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and I think that kind of falls in a similar wheelhouse to me, because that was such a tightly written show in its own right. Not as tightly as Odd Taxi, of course. Crime in Prohibition era America and all that, and a revenge story and all that bundled together. And I remember all of that, don't get me wrong, but I had no compulsion after I finished watching it to go watch it again, even as good as it was.
Man. Well, that show wasn't nearly as ambitious as this. I mean, that's I think what would have is tripping me up, I guess, about what I expected, which is, I mean, you're not wrong, of course, for having the feelings you have about it. Let me just say that. But I suppose, the show from a writing perspective strikes me as a work of great ambition. Just juggling so many things.
It's a technical masterpiece in terms of its writing.
In such a great way. And, Gogo in chat says that mystery shows can have limited rewatch value. But I don't think like the mystery in this, like, at least, you know, we're given the kind of the mystery at the beginning about like what's in Otokawa's house and, you know, where's the missing girl. But I think we may have even talked about this before, is like, it's just so not the draw of the show. So much as like the characters themselves, seeing who they are, getting to know them, seeing the interplay between them and how they're all connected.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly you want the mystery to be solved, but like, to me, finding out what was in Otokawa's closet was like the bottom of my checklist of, okay, you got to do this finale.
At least we got decent resolutions to that, as opposed to something like the numbers out of Lost or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, this wasn't like I will definitely credit this. I will definitely credit the show for this, which is the mystery is not there for its own sake. It is a driving force for the interplay between the characters and the intricate tapestry of connections between them, which the final batch of episodes really like goes all in on, draws it all out, and even at the very final scene continues to show like that, you know, like where, there's things to say about that.
Oh shit! So I think it's gonna have a high rewatch value for me. Just means like the possibility that I might rewatch it is high, because I don't tend to rewatch stuff a lot, especially TV series. I only have so much life that I have on this earth, Shadon. And so like rewatching things, at least right now, like a longer TV series, kind of like the prospect of it does not appeal to me very much. But I think, I mean, this one just like really touched a sweet spot for me in my brain. Like there's just so much going on. I can't turn it off. Like it's just, everything is so well done. Like it's just like it's crackling out of the screen. Like all the cool connections and the writing, the dialogue is good. Every character really feels like they have their own voice. And it's so to me it feels like an ideal series to revisit, because you're just like, God, like these characters, they're so awesome. And there's probably all sorts of like, I don't know, really fun details that a rewatch would, not that you necessarily miss them or I miss them, but like you just be like, oh my God, they did this so well. But anyway, rewatch value is not the end all be all. I guess I was just surprised by that.
But anyway, that's my take on the show anyway, if you want a non-spoiler version of it, for people who sit in the very tiny Venn diagram of people who listen to this podcast all the way through but somehow haven't watched any Odd Taxi yet. To that person out there, we love you for being our fan. Singular. We really do.
Sorry.
But you know, the Venn diagram is crushing you. It really is. It's locking you in place. You need to break free. Right. So with that out of the way, we're going to go through our usual structure, of course. One last big hurrah for it, which will firstly start off with creatives, and then we're going to go on to patron questions and then talking points, as I mentioned. So I'll pass it over to Doc to talk about the creatives in just a second.
Okie dokie. So, only a couple people to touch on this time, because a lot of the directors directed multiple episodes, and so we talked about them before. So we're going to talk about one episode director this time, and one seiyuu. The episode director who directed episode 10 only is Rokusuke Okimitsu. And Okimitsu has a very small CV. You know, we've got this Odd Taxi episode 10 direction. And it looks like that Okimitsu is really just mainly an episode director. The occasional storyboarding. It looks like that they've done the most work on Yokai Watch. Did you ever play Yokai Watch or see the show?
I've never heard of it before you told me about it today.
You've never heard of Yokai Watch? I guess, you know, you don't have children, so that probably explains.
Not that I know of.
Let's hope. That was a joke, by the way. Uh, you probably haven't been served this by the marketing, the algorithmic marketing gods because you don't have kids and or you're not a Pokemon person. And this is very much like in the vein of Pokemon, at least from what I recall of it. My kids were like, I mean, saying into it is like a strong way to put it. They watched a season of the show. They never played the game or anything like that. So yeah, it's just a really colorful kind of modern monster collecting thing. And Okamitsu directed directed and storyboarded like about like 10 different episodes, it looks like, across 3 seasons of Yokai Watch. The 2019 season, a season called Y:N Tu no Sogu, and a season called Shadowside. Also, The Tower of God, which I think was a Crunchyroll thing.
Oh yeah, that was like one of their very first webtoons, wasn't it? The one where most of the fans of that show inexplicably hated on a female character because she was bad to a guy because for narrative reasons. So basically, it was controversial at the time. I remember it, and I just remember thinking stuff like, "Man, most anime fans really do have it out for people, with the wrong kind of chromosomes, don't they? For no good reason." Yeah, I'm casting more shit out there. I don't give a shit anymore. This is like second stream. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Bang, bang, bang. Firing all those shots off.
It looks like it's got mostly good reviews on ANN. The majority of people classify it as good. A couple people. It looks like one person labeled it as the worst ever. And yeah, this is from last year.
That's the only thing they ever write. That is like the worst ever is their first, middle, and last name. It's also their gender and their date of birth.
Yes, they've modified a button on their keyboard. There's like a macro to just a one button press. Types in worst ever. So directed episode 3 of that. And I mean, that's a couple of other things, but that's really it. So looks like a relative newbie in the industry. So let's hope that they are taken care of and paid fairly and have a good working environment so that they will stay in this industry. The other person we've mentioned before, but I'm gonna just kind of unfurl this a little bit. Natsuki Hanai, who was the seiyuu for Odokawa, and he looks like he's in a lot of things. I'm looking at the video games. He has a role in Rune Factory 5, which is not even out here, and I'm kind of annoyed about that. I wish Rune Factory 5 would hurry up and come out. It's time. It's enough now. Release the game. A couple roles in Fire Emblem. He is Alm in Fire Emblem Echo Shadows of Valentia, which is an amazing game. And I don't think, though, that you can hear in our release of the game his work. I believe you have to listen to those lines in English, but the voice acting in English is good. But it's
sorry.
Cool.
Can I stop you there? Yukinon has just pointed out in chat. Apparently, he's Tanjiro from Demon Slayer.
Yeah. I was gonna get to that. He is Tanjiro.
Sorry, yes. Because if I've been drinking this at the time, I'd have probably spat it out because, I mean, Yuki's
mentioned this before, I believe, on the last stream.
If that's been the case, I must have missed it, or maybe I did mention it. But I will bring it up again in that case. Like, I want to give credit to this guy for the range that he has in that case.
Yep.
Because whatever problems I might have with Demon Slayer, he's spot on as with like voicing Tanjiro and giving him the appropriate like mood, tone, pitch, etc. for a kid that age. But he really also sells the grumpy, like cynical taxi driver person that he is in this show.
Oh, I know.
With a bit of vulnerability to him as well, of course. So yeah, kudos to him for doing such a bang up job.
He's someone called Falco Grice. and Attack on Titan final season parts 1 and 2, which is really funny that there's a final season part 2. I find that incredibly amusing. Kominato in Ace of the Diamond. There's quite a bit of Ace of the Diamond. Let's see, Digimon, Taichi Yagami, and a lot of the new, like the Digimon Adventure Try stuff. I wave my magic hand, let there be light. Jocko in Dragon Ball Super, which that's a fun role. That's another like look at this guy's range, because Jocko is like a almost a character like Big Daimon, except more hyperactive. Well, no, that's not true. He's a cop, but he's not corrupt. He's actually totally the opposite of that. He's just very animated and very much like he's comic relief because he's so obsessed with justice, but he's also very much a coward and won't try to like, actually enforce justice when it comes to people like Frieza and what have you. Takumi in the Food Wars stuff, Takumi Aldini. Looking for things that we have covered or that we would recognize. And there's a ton here. I mean, we haven't done any Haikyuu stuff, but it looks like he has a role in Haikyuu. We will be covering Noragami, but I think he's got a minor role in that. He's Biscuit in Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. Biscuit Griffin.
Oh God,
love Biscuit. Biscuit's great. Biscuit is good.
Another character from the naming convention of what shit do I have in my immediate vicinity?
Just Gundam, man. Like,
I mean, is also named Tequila Johnson or something like that? That would be probably a fucking Gundam name. Tequila Johnson.
That's a beautiful Gundam name.
Tamino, pay me for that, please. I'll give you all the names you want.
Like, oh shit!
You can also drop something else in the chat, which is the relatively recently released DLC character for GG Strive. Oh, fuck you, Yuki. He said he was Gold Lewis Dickinson in GG Strive. He was basically like this. He is, to give you people context, if you don't know what I'm talking about, he is the Secretary of Defense for the United States of America who fights with a coffin that contains an alien from Area 51 and also has a minigun.
What's his name?
Yeah, Gold Lewis Dickinson.
Well, no. You put an artificial pause there. You made it sound like his first name was Gold, his middle name was Lewis, his last name is Dickinson. When in actual fact, his first name is Gold Lewis, which is absurd, indeed. Patently absurd and hilarious. And I'm so happy that Gold Lewis exists.
I would have believed it though, like actually, to be honest. But well, I mean, Yuki will take that in stride. And again, like this is the final second stream, so like my limit is off. I don't give a fuck.
Let's see. We got Tokyo Ghoul, Ken Kaneki. We got a lot of stuff that I don't know if our people. Your Lion April, I've never seen, but I know it's got its fans. Jose Arima. But anyway, I think the point of this exercise is to say, hey, the Seiyu Natsuki Hanai is very talented and has a lot of range and can play lots of different kinds of roles. So all credit to you.
Indeed. Speaking of credit, I mean, we've talked about the creatives all the way through. And I think that I can say with absolute certainty that the people who've worked on this show should be proud of themselves and can handily put that on their CVs for the future, for whatever that might be worth. Like,
totally.
I mean, I've been like, P before at various shows we could where they've been terrible, and I've like, said like, that the creators don't deserve to work in like, fudge packing factories or whatever. I've been really cruel like that, but I will conversely be, kind and give credit where it is due. So to everyone who's made this show, they deserve all the accolades they've got and more, 100%. And
incredible. That
now leads us on to talking about why they deserve all the accolades more, because we have patron questions and talking points. So we're going to get right into that. So our first batch, our first pair, comes from Rackham, Pirate Prince. The very first one goes, what do you think happens after the show's end? Does Sakura kill Odokawa? Or is Odokawa working some kind of sting, assuming the info he planned to tell the police was the realization she was the one he drove, not the victim? Or perhaps something else entirely? And why do you think that choice is more likely than any other possible outcome? All right. Okay. I've thought about this. I've given this some consideration, and my answer is it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Not one bit of it. And I'll tell you why. Because what part of the genius of the final episode of Odd Taxi, which has the big revelation, of course, that Odokawa sees people as animals, which is something I will definitely come back round to addressing later. I mean, if I didn't address that, I'd have to hand in my Z-list YouTube anime critic license. But the point being is this, right? Part of the genius of the episode is it plays a number of rhetorical like unveilings to peel back the world as it is and offer a final statement on like the idea I've said a couple of times and you've also said about how what we view as mundane around us in reality is interesting, nuanced, and complex. We might think like that we live boring lives where we don't really know anyone, nothing interesting, but that's not necessarily true. And so part of that, I think, though, is the ending scene where Sakura is there. I suppose I should give context, by the way. Sakura murdered Yuki.
Do we know her name is Sakura? Where do we learn that? I don't recall that. I just remember them calling her, like, changing her name. You know what I mean? Like, is it okay that you go by Yuki Mitsuya? It's like, oh, yeah, it's fine. But I don't ever remember the revelation that she's called Sakura. I'm looking through the character list, and I don't. She's not.
It would be appropriate because it would be ironic, but well, there you go.
Sure,
but anyway, we'll call the Sakura for the sake of it, just to speed along here, which is she murders Yuki, the original lead singer of Mystery Kiss, because she had internalized the lesson of Mother gave, which is do whatever you have to make your dreams come true, including killing someone. Although, merely that part was not so much spoken, but I mean, the ends justify the means and all that. And she has gotten away scot-free as well, for the most part. Like, Rui from Mystery Kiss, who we've found in these batch of episodes, actually helped dispose of Yuki's body, has been implicated in her murder.
No wonder she's so jaded.
Yeah. I mean, Dobu, Yano, and Polar Bear Dude, whose name I can't remember, they're all basically all the criminals are in prison. The only person who's been a criminal who, apart from the one of the police brothers, but he might very well be dead. It's not clear on that. But anyway, that's not relevant to this. Right. Sakura gets away pretty scot-free, and the closing scene is of her getting into Odokawa's taxi, following a phone call to her mother, where she basically, in the most I did it, but not really. Like, I'm just being circumspect by where she basically confirms that she did kill her. And then we see a flashback of her doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it. Odokawa says where to, and she just smiles at him, and that's the show. Done. And here's the thing. I think it's doing that because all of the connections that we've seen thus far in the show, everything has been gradually peeled away. Which is something else I'm going to talk about later, about the genius of how the show gradually peels all the layers back. But everything's revealed. Pretty much everyone knows who everyone else is. Everyone else has had access to the same conspiracy board, linking everyone else together. All the truth is out there. Everything that has been revealed has been revealed. We know about Odokawa's condition. We know about the criminals being put away. All sorts of stuff has happened, but that has not been revealed. And I think that serves as a limiter on the show's own premise a little bit to make it not so absurd where everything gets put out there. Everything is finally revealed. There's that one little nugget of information that remains that no one, apart from Sakura, of course, really knows. And I think that, therefore, if I had to guess what happens after the show's end, I would say Odokawa takes her in a taxi to where she wants to go, she pays him, and then that's it. Because the point is more that even if we do think we, can learn everything that we can learn about the people we've interacted with in our lives, even randomers on the street, there's always that one thing just a bit further out of the way that we won't necessarily come into knowledge of. So I think it's more that final point to just kind of not make it so that everything is out there and known by Odokawa and colleagues. There's just that one thing still. And it's also just a great ending in its own right, let's be fair. Like,
yeah.
But I think that's the key point to it there, where it's just meant to be more as I say, like a limiter on its own, like final on all of its revelations, where it's like it will go so far but stop, rather than putting everything out there, which I think would be a bit too much.
Right. I see what you mean. Like, just have everything ending in a nice, neat package. I feel a little flat. I mean, like you said, it certainly is a spicy ending.
Oh yes.
I feel like he's gonna die because she has killed someone else basically the exact same way. The way that manager San tried to kill him, but was unsuccessful.
The key difference though is that she's like
Shirakawa.
She's like further the weight of him. I don't think that she could. I don't think she'd be able to take Odokawa that way.
That's true.
And she's got no need to either.
Maybe like a new weird like entanglement then will ensue. Like, the next big adventure, right? But even if it is the end for Odokawa there, I think as a character, he's kind of like he's done it. You know, he's completed his arc, and he has like reconciled like his inner turmoil, and like sees the world as it really is, and like helped other people. And yeah, I mean, I just think he's kind of like, if he were to exit the story, then the character would not be done any sort of disservice necessarily.
I agree, 100%.
You know, it's interesting that you brought up the fake oh gosh, I don't want to call her Sakura because I don't see the fake Yuki, the fake Mitsuya. Like the speech that her mom gives her about the dreams, and you know, you only get one go at this life, so make sure you fulfill your dreams. Like, maybe there's something about this show that is like pushing back against the idea of like that cultural idea of like dream big and like, you know, go and do everything it takes to like achieve. Because like it feels like the characters who, and maybe I'm forgetting some, but it feels like the characters who take that to heart all end up suffering in some way, right?
Kakiana.
Sorry?
Kakiana, for example.
Oh, yeah. I mean, God, I forgot. I wasn't even thinking. I was thinking about Nikaido.
Also fair.
Totally. I mean, like, her, I mean, she's at this point in her life where like nothing will satisfy her. You know, lucky she met Baba in some ways. And then certainly the girl that becomes a killer, you know, the fake Mitsuya. And then also the not Baba, but the Shibakawa, or sorry, Shibagaki, the other member of the Homo sapiens who like on stage when he like, you know, goes mask off and starts talking about his real regrets. He's just like, I regret following my dreams. I wish I'd never been a comedian. Like, I fucking hate you. like all that stuff. And it seems like the one who's most content, you know, out of everyone, at the end of this is the person who like was like just wanted to pay back the people that were kind to him, wanted to lead like a normal life, had, you know, very sort of modest goals, and did not like let his ambition mean more to him than like human kindness. And that was Odokawa. You know, it seems like all the other characters who had these like huge concepts like folly or dreams dominating their life ended up really suffering in some way.
We also had Imai, and I can't remember the name of the Skull Kid, the you know what I'm talking about. Like the thing that linked both of them together though was that their lives were defined by random chance. We had one person who was brought to the pits of despair because of it, and one person, Imai, who was with the giantest of asterisks on this, elated by it. And I'm saying giant asterisks on this, and I'll talk about Imai later. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of complex. There's a lot of complex like angles, different perspectives on each of the characters, like and how they are influenced by this. And indeed, to go back to the idea of dreams, though, like Anoda Kao, like he literally says in his flashback, his recounting of his childhood, that he likes animals and he wants to work driving a car. And guess what? He got both. He lived a very simple life, very simple ambitions, but he was ultimately content by it, I would say. So yeah. Okay, shall we move on to the next question?
Next.
All right then. So from Rackham again, how do you feel Kabusawa, who I'm going to call the engagement-hungry hippo, how do you feel in these episodes accurately depicts the way social media fame can make someone feel entitled, inflate their ego, lead them to exploit others? For example, he refers to his followers as slaves when he thinks he caught Dobu, and how quickly they can burn their reputation via their own mistakes and stupidity. So, okay. This is where I have to make a mild criticism.
Okay.
But it's very, very mild because this is not a mistake on the show's part, but rather I think that it is specifically a situation as presented that is not necessarily emblematic of what's really happening in social media these days. And what do I mean by that? The target of Kabusawa's social media content, if you want to even call it that, is a single person. Now, okay, yes, people might very well start saying, well, what about, like, say, Anissa Sarkeesian or all these other people who have been wrongly abused through social media? But they are ultimately the scapegoats for a philosophy and a political leaning set of values, whatever you want to call it. But the thing is, Kabusawa's targeting of Dobu isn't really what's happening en masse in social media in the real world moment, because the people who are grifting from their fans, who are lying to them, who are abusing their trust, are doing so not to target specific people, unless they're doing so, and if they do, it is because it is part of a wider ideology. How many right-wing grifters can you and I name between us, Doc, where they're not targeting specific people, but rather they're trying to keep the lights on by lying to people? And that, I think, is the mild criticism I would make here, because I can't recall the last time I really saw, apart from the example I gave in a previous episode, and this is just a million my own ignorance here, I'm talking anecdotally, of where social media people were driven to do what did because they had a specific targeting of one person. Because funnily enough, at that point, that becomes harassment and probably gets them binned. Although, I will note, I actually think this is also a subtle bit of genius on the show's part, because the question then has to be asked. Let's hypothetically say that Kabusawa did somehow, I don't know how, maybe he gets Dobu to slip on a banana peel and he cripples himself. He catches him. Let's say he does that, and he's the hero of the town, and all of this stuff, all of this like plays out exactly as his like adult fantasy wants it to be. The question then is, what happens next? Because he built his entire personality, his entire online media presence around this one person.
Yeah, I don't know if he's thinking that far ahead.
But that's exactly it, though. Like, he was ultimately destined to fail, even if he succeeded in the most unimaginable way possible, which I think is great. I think that's a great note. But my point rather is that while I do think that Kabusawa's arc like works in terms of like how people do get like dragged into the content gristle mill, like they start lying to people and all that, as he categorically did. The problem is that the target of all of that is not what we tend to see in reality, which is like movements, identitarian politics and all that, like where people start talking about SJWs, Antifa, you name it. That's what they make. That's what people in like grifters make content about these days. Or they just flat out make shit like, cinema sins, for example. They're not targeting people. They're targeting products or groups. And that's where I think this kind of has a little bit of a disconnect for me. But in the context of the show as a case study, it is flawlessly executed.
I don't agree. I mean, I think certainly what you're saying happens, but I mean, I think, Kiwi Farms is built on like getting people's information, individuals' information, so that groups of people can harass and dox them. And those people aren't just picked at random. They're picked for like, different reasons, like you said, to do with ideology. But, Kabusawa has his own ideology about, he's got this like weird sense of justice, and he like, it's very kind of naive, and, he latches on to someone he sees in the news, right? The Twitter main character of the day, you might say. And it's like, this person needs to go down. We need to take care of this person. And I think it's not that big of a leap for you to say, like, Kabusawa trying to get Dobu arrested, stop him from doing his job and supporting himself, in a manner of speaking, is, not too far away from what, you talked about the right-wing grifters, what a lot of like really kind of woke scold, like super kind of, I don't know, online hypersensitive folks will go around looking for, someone who, I don't know, said something bad or weird, maybe even years and years ago, to get them fired, which is not to condone necessarily things they say, but it's just like so out of proportion. And like, I don't know. I've just seen a few examples of it lately that just seemed quite wild. So I don't know. To me, like, it doesn't seem that far-fetched or that out of touch in terms of like the things that are happening online. One person or a small group ginning up a lot of animosity towards a single person, and then big consequences in that person's life happening within like 24 hours.
Yeah. I do agree with you, because I hadn't even thought of Kiwi Farms, because I tend to try not to think about them, to be honest, because it just makes me want to start spitting. But I do hear where you're coming from now, and I actually think that would have been a fascinating thing if we did get that follow-up where, okay, maybe he didn't catch Dobu, or he did, or whatever. This is just me like completely fan wanking this, so ignore me if you want to. But point being is like, and then we see like what he has to do next, and that's when the point where he starts making shit like Kiwi Farms, and it goes completely fucking out of control, and he's really fucking with people. But I know I said on a previous episode of this where I said like Dobu should not be prosecuted for the crimes he hasn't committed, because that's not how justice works, and I stick by that. But the problem is that Kabusawa is still targeting someone who, is a criminal. There is like legitimate reason for Dobu to be put away and arrested. Even though, and I will say again, this is one of the show's strengths, we see the complexity of the situation where Dobu like seems almost like a necessary evil throughout much of it, to the point where I almost forgot a couple of times that he actually was a career criminal who deserved to be banged up. I think it's just one of those cases where, because this is very specifically about one character, that's where I'm thinking like, if you want to make wider like comparisons to it, becomes a little bit more difficult. But then, conversely, I should also know, you might just want to necessarily think of it as a case study, because this is a very specific set of characters having very specific interactions. And while the show certainly does take broad swipes at things like the idol industry, for example, or social media engagement, you also need to just kind of keep it within the sphere it operates in, I think, as well.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't really get to see what his followers are doing, because he has ginned up a lot of, like, I would assume, although I mean maybe it's wrong to assume, but they're not just sort of all watching, that they're all participating, because he's got them to give him money to do salons, and they're trying to do detective work, I think, to find Dobu and that kind of thing. he sort of started a movement. There is kind of a little movement, I think, happening. Like these, people want to bring Dobu to justice and take him out, and the world will be better off without him, and that kind of thing. So, to me, this didn't like, I don't know. I guess like this is one of the things that I think is, I don't know, that rang really true to me. Like this whole thing felt very relevant. Whereas sometimes, and we'll see how this ages, right? I mean, sometimes in anime, like social media, it can feel really like, do you know how social media works? Like, if only it was this great in real life. Like I think of Gacha Man crowds.
I was going to bring that up later, but damn it, you beat me to the punch. Fair cop though. I mean, the thing is, right, I mean, I will utterly concede to the fact, I mean, I brought the example last time, that there are times when social media is used to an ill end for vigilante justice. But conversely, there are times when it is used appropriately and does result in people's lives being saved and all that. Yeah. So I mean, that's, I think, where my, like, if you want to say, like, does it have, like, a, as far as Kabusawa is concerned, like, does he feel representative of, like, how people use it? I think that if you consider him, maybe this is me just realigning my opinion, maybe you consider him as one cog in the machine, that makes more sense. Because ultimately, I think in some small way, he is a victim of it as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Absolutely. That's true. And I think he's not necessarily representative of a user, but I think he's meant to be representative or the show's way of taking a look at people that do achieve fame through it, because most people don't.
Yeah. I will, however, note one other thing that is definitely an unambiguously good point of the show to make, which is we see him sleeping with one of his fans, and boy, how do they have the measure of him. And I like that actually happened in the sense of what they said. Where they're basically saying, like, you're a coward, blah, 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 and then your fans are sleeping you and all this. And she's like, oh, I guess I am.
I love how she puts it, like, everyone says, and then just lists this massive, like, list of insults.
Yeah. And the thing is, they're all she's entirely correct about that. Mm-hmm. But I actually like that for one reason, which is it foreshadows what would have been the beginning of the end for him, even if nothing had happened with Dobu as a result of him confronting him. Because, spoiler alert, for people who've not seen Odd Taxi, Kabusawa does get the chance to confront Dobu in person after Dobu has been shot by one of the Diamond Brothers, completely coincidentally. So how nice for Kabusawa. How nice for Kabusawa.
Yeah.
And Kabusawa thinks he's got the upper hand on him, but even though Dobu's been grazed, he is still a career criminal and a violent thug, so spoilers, Kabusawa practically shits himself when Dobu gets the upper hand. What a surprise. Oh my. I couldn't have possibly seen that coming. But, I mean, that's why I like that happening with that fan, though, because it does foreshadow the end for him, even if that hadn't happened. People were onto him.
Totally.
People understood him as the coward he was.
I like that you said that that you felt he was also a victim. Because one of the things I love about this show that you reminded me of the scene is how, like, none of the characters, this is going to sound very hackneyed here, but none of them are really these, like, black and white, like, super good, super bad. Like, they're all just pretty, like, gray, morally, like, flawed people, and they're on kind of a spectrum. Like, you certainly say people like Goriki are, toward the good end of things, and people like Dobu are, like, toward the not so great end. But, like, I mean, that scene has, like, Dobu basically turning Kabusawa's life around in some ways, like, actually listening to him and getting to the root of his problems and getting him to confront his own inadequacies is, like, he really needed that shit. You know what I mean? And Dobu was, like, almost like a mentor figure in that moment, even though, I mean, he's done some really awful shit, like to Shirakawa and stuff like that. So I love that about the show, and I love that scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to be found here. So I think, I mean, if I had to be honest overall, I think it works if you look at it as a case study and not as a broad application, because to me the broad application would need to be that Kabusawa isn't just targeting Dowu, but is just generally shitting on all sorts of different people or even ideologies and all that. But I think that would also not have been what Odd Taxi should have done anyway, because Odd Taxi is very specifically an ensemble character study.
Yeah, and he's not like a career grifter himself. He's just like,
they only got to start somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I think is fantastic about it, right? Is he's not like Dave Rubin. No, he's not some cottage industry. Ben
no, he's smarter than Dave Rubin, to be fair.
many are. But he just like it stumbles into this idea and like runs away with it, and then at some point it becomes the master of him. He has to feed this monster he's created. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's just so interesting. And then there's like the whole thing at the end where almost like parallel to Odokawa's ending, because Kabusawa, like, you think like, you know what, he's done. He's realized the error of his ways, but he still wants that fame. He still wants the viral video.
Yeah, he doesn't quite learn his lesson.
He takes the video of the car, and it's like, oh my God, this is going to go viral. This is great. He bought a new phone. And I mean, I think that that's fantastic, right? And I think that they didn't give him such a pat ending. Like, well, he learned, and then that's it. Like, you kind of can't escape, like, that kind of like
the siren call of social media.
Yes, exactly. Like personal tech, social media, social networks, like that. Well, like, we're so enmeshed and integrated together. Like, you kind of can't escape it. And like, he's got problems that need to be solved and worked through by like a therapist and not like a gangster.
Well, you know what's funny that just occurred to me when you were talking about that, actually. We have, of course, Skull Kid, whose name I don't recall, but we also have Imai, who are both, the victims in one form or another of random chance, but they're gamblers. And one might wonder, like, this is where, a psychologist could do better than I, but one might wonder if, whatever part of your brain is engaged by gambling, whatever that part of that triggers, is also simply triggered by attempting to get social media engagement to go viral. Because you are posting something essentially on the random chance that it gets noticed by the great algorithm. Maybe it's not too dissimilar. I mean, the show has certainly made cross comparisons between characters before, and also ideas like how, you've got Rui exploiting her fans in an indirect and legal way, but how is that any different than Shio, like, exploiting poor Kakiana in her badger game? So maybe there's not something so dissimilar there in terms of like gambling. It's just one's got far less of an actual material cost, but it will, however, enact a price on one's soul.
And Rui herself is kind of cornered into things, like, just sort of happens upon Sakura dead, and then the Yakuza take over and pull her into it. And before she knows it, she's an accomplice. Like, everybody, yeah. I mean, I feel like Chance in this show, the whims of fate, like, to have their pound of flesh from everyone, and like everybody just sort of deals with it differently. Some better and some worse.
She got her go directly to jail card, and she's going to roll a fucking double at some point. Poor woman. Anyway, do we have anything else to add to that question from Rackham about Kabusawa?
I think we pretty much answered it.
Sweet. All right, then let's move on to the next question. This is a big one. This one comes from Gogo Type Robot. So in the end, we find out that all the characters are human and appear as animals due to Odokawa's injury. Holy shit. What does the artistic choice to depict humans as animals achieve? Would the story work without this? All right. Okay, let's fucking do this. Let's fucking talk about the animals. So I'm of the opinion that the story could work without it, but I think it would be diminished by it. I think it would still function. But I think that the reveal in the end that they are indeed human and not animals actually serves a very powerful rhetorical purpose in this text. Because if you think about it, one of the messages of Odd Taxi throughout all of it thus far has been that what we think is like our mundane little lives, like there's so much interesting stuff happening in the periphery around it. Like Otakar is a taxi driver, but he becomes embroiled in all of this stuff in the lives of so many different people. When in reality, he should drive them home and think, God, that guy smelled like onion or something weird like that, It should have no more reaction than that, really. And I think the use of animals in this case is used to disarm our skepticism about what's happening. Because by presenting the characters animals, we're like, that's what our focus is on as far as like how, oh, this seems like a little silly and absurd and all that, but I'm okay, I'm on board with it. Like, it's your initial like opening statement on the essay, if you want to call it that. And then, right at the end, once we're completely on board with the events of the show, it's all pulled back. The curtain is drawn up, and we see that these are humans. And because of all the time we've spent seeing them as animals, with that being the deflecting element to not make us think this is all bullshit, there's no way that all this stuff would happen in a single group of people, otherwise possible though it may be, it deflects our attention from that, and therefore is pulled away at the last minute when we're ready to accept the show's message of this is possible. Because if it was just all regular people, it might be a bit less, palpable to some viewers, I would argue. And so I think, therefore, the idea of the animals is this rhetorical flourish at the very end to show that, they are humans, and therefore all the experiences they've been through are plausible. You might not even necessarily be a taxi driver, but how many people do you bump into in the streets? That might have some strange story around them. And this is also why I mentioned the idea of Sakura not having anything to do with Otakar at the end and being undiscovered, because, I don't mean to say like all the people I meet in the streets are murderers, of course, but rather there are rich and interesting and nuanced lives behind every person you meet. They're not just simply faces in a crowd. And so I think that's a key part of like why the animal thing is there to, basically disarm us until we're ready to accept the show's message at the end when we fully like got it on board. I think it's a great little flourish at the very end. And I'm not going to also deny that it has value, of course, for Otakar as a character. Because I admit it feels a little hack how it's resolved in that he drowns again and suddenly it's all sorted. But that being said, I'm willing to let it slide because I think that it ties into his character arc where he was afraid and bullied of everyone, and yet ultimately he takes charge. Like, as the taxi driver, like his final act of driving in the show before he picks Sakura up is to dictate his own path, and he's doing so in order to protect someone else's money. Like, if he wanted to, he could just pop the trunk and let it all pour out. Fuck it, who cares? Like, he might doesn't win his lottery money. Oh no, whatever, could have done that. But he's fighting back against a bullying force that seeks to, control people. And having then overcome that force in the end through his act of like, I'd rather live free than, well, die hard, if you want to call it that. Sorry. I'd rather live free than under your yoke. Like, no wonder he doesn't need this defense mechanism anymore of seeing people as animals. For the context, by the way, he gained this because his mother basically drove him and his dad into the river. And then in drowning, like, because he's been so traumatized by that and other childhood abuse, and also his love of animals, like, he started seeing people as animals as a defense mechanism, including why he sees himself as a walrus, because people calling him a walrus. But, he doesn't need to do that anymore because he's no longer afraid of other people. So I'm willing to accept it more on those terms as like a thing that's no longer required, rather than worrying about the mechanics of how any of that makes any fucking sense.
Right.
But yeah, I think it works really well, both as a character moment for him, but also as that rhetorical flourish I mentioned, where it finally allows us to accept the show's message that if this can happen to Odokawa, it can happen to the rest of us. And by making that point, it opens us up to the possibility of so many different, like, interconnected lives and experiences that we might not even necessarily be aware of, but are just literally right in front of us. And by the way, if you think I'm crazy in saying, like, that I believe in what the show presents as, like, how something can spiral like so out of control from just such a simple thing, I'm going to point to this podcast's very existence as evidence of that. Because I can look back at the root cause of that, and that was me going to my first fighting game tournament over 7 years ago. And everything that's blossomed out as a result of that is just fucking insane when I think about it. I'm living proof of the message the show actually tries to put across as a result.
Here. Yeah. The only thing I have to add to any of this, because I agree with everything you said, is the artistic appeal is huge. Because, I mean, one of the things that, like, just that drew me to it is the animal people. I love stories about animal people. Love them. Well documented on this podcast. And the kind of absurd, like, oh, this is a story called Odd Taxi about a walrus who drives a taxi. And he drives other animals around in his I mean, that's just like such a great hook conceptually and visually. Like, that it's very, very strong. I think it adds to the, like, the window shopping, like, elevator pitch, curb appeal of the whole thing. And then, if you want to see this show as like an exercise in, like, getting the viewer, the reader, to understand that that there's not always, and oftentimes most of the time there's not like a single valid true perspective at the expense of all others, that there is, we have this whole huge cast of characters, and from each of their different points of view, certain other members of the cast are the villains. They're bad. And you see it from their point of view because, like, all these characters are given such, like, their due, like, such screen time and backstory, and, like, we kind of inhabit them and their headspace. And at the very end, we are shown in a just very kind of shocking, explicit way that the perspective that we all thought was the true perspective of the show is actually not. You know what I mean? It was just this one guy's way of seeing the world that doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And, I think that was a thing that was in like, that was something that the show enforced really well and kind of repeated without, it didn't grow stale, that message, but it was enforced in a lot of different and interesting ways. I have to say I was a little sad about it because, as I said, I love animal people. I think everyone is like 10% to 20% less interesting since they're not an animal.
Yeah. I mean, I think like historically, from more recent anime that I've watched, they involve anthropomorphized animals. They tend to be used in a very literal sense, sort of like you've got Beastars, for example, which is about nature versus nurture. Like, am I a slave to my, like, instincts as a wolf, like Legoshi has, versus what he chooses to be? Or you can have it be Brand New Animal, which is just appealing to fascists and eugenicists. But anyway, that's beside the point. And there's all sorts of other shows I can mention. But I think this is one of the more creative uses I've seen of it, because there's no literal nature to it. I think the only way one can make a tie between the character, like the animals that Odokawa sees people as, and who they are as people, is probably with the criminals. Like Dobu is like the monkey, for example, the violent-looking baboon. You've got the polar bear guy. Yano was the porcupine, very prickly, but ultimately leaving it up to people's work, that kind of thing. Or even how, like, despite the fact that he says he wants something to do with Shirokara, like, she's still an alpaca to him, which, people like alpacas, they're cute, so
right.
Clearly it must find it appealing in some way.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't even think it was to, like, their, I don't think he was doing that because of their natures. I think it was just sort of his brain kind of did some work based on what they looked like.
Yeah, I think
you see them as human, and they all look like, you know.
That is true. Yeah, Yano has so much hair gel on him that I hope he never smokes because that shit's going up. So you're absolutely right. Like, it is mostly a physical thing, but I think one could tie it a little bit into some, but only for some characters and not for all. I mean, I don't think poor Kakiyana's heart could take it if he said he looks like a gibbon. Poor guy's had enough shit to deal with. He doesn't need to be told that.
He looks so old now. Like, me, really looks old.
I mean, after what he's been through, I'm not surprised. I feel fucking old after that.
Didn't frictions quite that old.
I'll be coming back to Kakiyana later, by the way, because I think this show also has a very powerful message that's to do with him. But I'm going to save that. I'm going to save it. Savor it.
Save it.
All right. Anything else to add on that question, Doc, or should we move on?
Let's move on. Next.
Let's move on. All right. We have 2 questions from Re_Q or Riku, not to be confused with Riku from Final Fantasy X or 10-2. Thank God for that. Right. First question. How and for how long did the murder/mystery narrative keep you guessing? And at what point did you think you'd got it? And how does it affect your experience or enjoyment of the series? I'm going to be honest, the murder was barely on my mind for much of this. I think I was too enraptured by everything else that was going on and too absorbed into it. I mean, at the end, we find out Sakura is the person who killed Yuki, for example, and it's like...
I mean, that mystery wasn't even... Well, I guess she was missing. And then we found out she was dead.
The characters themselves don't seem to have a much of interest in it, though, to be quite honest. Like, I mean, I was thinking that through much of it. Like, if they think that Odokawa has kidnapped her, where the fuck is that search warrant? No one seems to care, and one can make a point about that in of itself, of course. But anyway, to me, like, the murder mystery itself was...
Well, can I bring...
Go on. Do it.
Just a bit of personal experience from someone who has a close family member who became a missing person last year and has not been found. The amount of the little care that is put into that sort of thing. I mean, it's unsurprising, I guess. It's a realistic depiction that, you know, police aren't like combing the streets in droves looking for this single missing person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that's kind of how it is, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So ultimately, no, it didn't register on my mind for much of it. That's because I was just too caught up in the events as they were unfolding. Like, I was, for example, like thinking, how the fuck are they going to get Kakiyana out of this? You know, and then we got the episode about Rui's backstory and all that. And so I think the show even doesn't necessarily place that much emphasis on it, given what time it chooses to spend its attention on. But rather, I think it's a simmering background element that serves as the igniting instant for much of the show's events. Not all of them, because Imai's like lottery win, by definition, has no relation to anything else that goes on in the show. And when I say that, I mean as in like a causal relationship. By virtue of it being a lottery win, it cannot have any, unless they rigged it, but that's never ventured. Anyway, you know what I mean. And similarly, of course, also with Tanaka's, thank you, by the way, to Racken for providing the name in chat there. For Tanaka's, like, you know, woes with gacha and online auctions, they're not causally related to her death. But it is nonetheless one of the inciting incidents that's just constantly simmering in the background. So yeah, ultimately the murder, I think the biggest mystery I was most concerned with was why they look like animals, and well, I'm glad that paid off. But point being is that it is there.
They should have just been animals just because it should have happened. God damn it! Why did it have to be a fucking plot point?
Bait and switch, bro. Bait and switch.
Hate it.
But in the end, like, you know, I think that ultimately even the show admits it's not necessarily the most important thing it is concerned with.
Yeah, I mean, the inciting incident, like you said, is a good way to put it. The real nexus of everything was Odokawa's taxi, you know, him and then his like occupation. And that was the hub through which like everything else kind of ran through. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't really engaged in trying to figure it out because the show was doing so many things that were in the foreground. I was really paying attention to that stuff. I mean, toward the middle of the show, the real plot that I was engaged in was like how Dobu and Otokawa are gonna like pull off this like, you know, this heist from Yano. What is this bank robbery thing going to be like? How in a general sense is Otokawa going to dupe Dobu and get him back? Because from about like episode 5 or so on, like that's kind of his goal. And then like later on, like the sort of backstory of who Otokawa is, you know, Goriki going around doing his like field trip, doing various research, like that becomes much more important. So yeah, like I was never really like, it's just spending a lot of time thinking about it. I was very content to let the show kind of like lay that out however it would. No, because I was just absorbed in other things. And so, yeah, I don't really think this affected my enjoyment of the series. Like, I mean, if they never solved it, you know, we'd be complaining about it. But they did in a clever and interesting way that I didn't really see coming at all. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by all of it. I was surprised that that the girl was a mystery kiss girl, that she was murdered by the current mystery kiss girl, and just all of it, everything. Like I was very sad that just the cat was in Otokawa's closet. It was all, you know, nothing that I expected. So, and I thought it was all great. I mean, it was all well done and everything. So, no complaints for me.
Definitely. Right, next question then. Our final patron question of second stream. God help us. Oh no, it's all over. This one is, again from Riku. What do you think Odd Taxi has to say about the way its characters take justice into their own hands, especially through vigilantism, for example, Kabusawa and Otokawa, in very different ways, or charity, such as Kuroda, the tapir Yakuza boss? I think that, like everything else in this show, we have to look at it as a case study. By which I mean, this is something I was thinking about when I watched a Big Joel video recently.
Which one?
Where I think, oh gosh, you know, I've got a 404 error in my head. Never mind.
Oh no,
I'll figure it out later.
Is it a recent one?
No, it's not.
Okay,
I know that much. But point being, I think that you have to take it as a case study where it is just strictly about the characters involved. And yeah, if I was still to have a takeaway from the show, I think it would just be that vigilantism is ultimately a gray area where you cannot foresee, like, I would say, like, where it's appropriate to do or not. Like, and it's just something that tends to happen. Although that being said, like, I think one thing I'll note as well is about the idea of heroism, because I would actually say I'd call Otokawa a hero, but I wouldn't call Kabusawa a hero. And I think the key distinction here is that heroism, I think, is something that, as I would define it, is when you're put in a spontaneous situation which demands action for the benefit of all, or the benefit of people who have been wronged, do you do that or not? Now, Kabusawa, of course, was never put in a spontaneous position because he was actively hunting Dobu for his own bullshit reasons. He was never doing it for that. You know, never doing it for altruism. But Otokawa, like, was basically put in this situation multiple times, like with Dobu getting in his car in one of the early episodes, all this sort of stuff. Like, did he fly? Was it fight or flight? And he decided to take a stand, even at the risk of his own life, to protect people that he knew very little about. So, if I had to say anything about what the show purports towards vigilante justice, I'd say that I think it says that in very specific circumstances, in very specific cases, again, why I mentioned it's a case study, it is acceptable. And in other cases, it absolutely is not with Kabusawa. But
yeah,
I think while we can make that assertion, we can't broad stroke away the fact that, as in real life, that A, it happens to begin with, and B, sometimes it happens and it's fine and accepted, even though the law takes a bad look at vigilante justice, generally speaking. But there are times, of course, when it is not done for the right reasons or done with the right information and results in tragedy. And I think it speaks against the idea of hard tax as a whole, where it is, as I say, a case study of complex circumstances coming together in a very specific chemical reaction, if you want to call it that. And therefore,
case
it
by
doesn't.
Case morality.
That's all I got. And I'll be fair to Odd Taxi, like, there is no easy answer to vigilante justice, because I know full well, speaking from my own mindset, like there'd be times when I'd be totally in favor of it, and times where I'd be like, no, what the fuck are you thinking? This is stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, motive matters a lot, you know.
Yeah, motive certainly, but also then personal safety. I mean, in a different story, if Kabusawa, for example, was not making shit up about Dobu for his own ends, where he was basically saying that he did everything short of conjure up the 12 plagues of Egypt and, like start, bombing places or whatever. Like, even if he was completely on the mark for his assessment of him and what he was claiming he did, he's still putting himself in incredible danger by doing this. He's not quit for it. He's not up for it. He believes he is, but he's talking a big game and he's got nothing to back it up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's complicated and nuanced, like the show. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple complicating factors. One is that, like, the show, I think, is saying that vigilantism is unfortunately is a live option for many people and is a necessary option because the public law enforcement and justice system we have is bad. I mean, I really love the way that the Diamond story ended up. Like, I do think, after seeing it all, like, it really, as you often say, has its cake and eats it in terms of it being a personal human story about these two boys, but it also, I think, it does a great job of like making this broad statement about the police in general, because you have sort of twin faces of it. Like one is competent but corrupt, and the other is not corrupt, like very like shining white knight, but totally incompetent and unable to execute justice. And so as these two kind of represent the different like faces and modes of the institution of the police in general, you have people that feel like to effectively do the things that they believe ought to be done, that are right to be done, they have to do them. And I think, the question says that Kabusawa takes justice into his own hands. And I don't think I think that's a mistaken way to put it. Kabusawa, I think we see immediately with Nobu, like Kabusawa doesn't really have a sense of justice.
Oh, fuck. Nope, absolutely not.
He has he's just total self-interest is at work, and is exposed as a coward and a fraud, and that his motivations were like based in self-hate. And I think justice is a very different thing from that. It's a lot closer to like what Otokawa has. I mean, Otokawa has conviction, but he also has the necessary means, the wits, the will, the wherewithal, the tools, the allies, and to make justice happen. To take it into his own hands. And I think all that stuff is like rolled up into justice. Because I mean, you can. I don't know. I think. You could even have conviction about what's right, but like that's all you have is conviction. Like that sort of justice seems to me to be like a more robust, fuller concept, and the ability to execute it is kind of in that. And so, yeah, and I think Kuroda is an interesting one as well. Someone who there's a lot of nuance, as you mentioned, to look at this character who, is on the wrong side of the law some of the time, but also does an awful lot of good for people, for a lot of people who have been, touched by tragedy. So, yeah, I mean, this is not a show with easy answers, but I do think, like the conclusion you came to is pretty good here, that case by case is an important way to look at it, and just kind of having a fuller understanding of the notion of justice, I think, like, makes this a little bit easier, and like roots out people like Kabusawa from this. And then, and just how the police kind of factor or don't factor really in a lot of ways into the execution of justice in this universe.
Yeah, I think something that should be noted about the concept of justice that really distinguishes what it means for it to, because I don't think Riku was wrong to say about taking justice and so on, but rather that Kabusawa's completely wrong idea of it. I think justice is something that is ephemeral, like the idea of law or scientific interest, in that it should, if you are trying to practice it, be completely divorced from ego. It needs to be done clinically. That's the way I would describe it. And Kabusawa is entirely all about ego. That is all he is.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say Otokawa, there's some ego in it for him as well. I think
a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's got some desire for personal revenge on behalf of his lady friend.
True. Definitely when it comes to dealing with, helping her, that's absolutely true. But like we said, case by case. Sorry.
Yeah, and
there's no reduction. There's no reductionism going on here. I'm sorry, we can't do it.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's the show's not like sort of about absolutism. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Right. I think that brings us to the end of our questions, unless you have anything else to add, Doc.
No, I mean, Riku is in chat now. And there's a lot of interesting stuff being said by Riku and Rackham, the new comedy duo, Riku and Rackham. So Riku says, although the younger Daimon has a pretty unnuanced view of crime as evil, all evil people should be punished, yada yada, until he has to face it close to home with his brother. Totally. I mean, that's when I say, like, the show succeeds. That story succeeds on like a human level, because sort of his ideals butt up against his own humanity and like real people he knows in his life, and he kind of has to deal with it and sort it. And that's very interesting, very cool. That he is like, the law should forgive you. Like, you know what I mean? The law will never forgive you, but it should, because you're my brother. And it's just so contradictory, but like, it's also so right, I think it's so right. And ultimately he's still like, when all is said and done, at the end of the day, he's very much like, well, Dobu, you can threaten legal action against my brother, but he should go to jail. He did a bad thing. He's bad. He's also my brother, but he's bad. I love it.
I can, think these things simultaneously. Absolutely. What you might otherwise think as irreconcilable ideas can indeed exist in your mind at once. Absolutely. Right. If I'm not mistaken, then I think that brings us to the end of our Patreon questions. So thank you very much to Rackham, to Gogo Toy Robot, and to Riku for submitting those. Hugely appreciated. Thank you. In turn, I should add to everyone who's contributed a Patreon question all the way through second stream and everywhere else. But I mean, we'll give a particular shout out to the second stream contributors for this one, because our conversations wouldn't have been half as interesting if these questions were not out there to, stimulate our, brain masses, whatever you want to call it.
Totally.
So thank you all for that. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Rackham asks can I ask you a question?
Oh, I know what you're gonna ask. I know what you're gonna ask.
Okay, all
Do
right.
Do it.
Rackham asks, what animal Doc and Shadon feel that they would be, and that Otakawa would see them to be.
British Bulldog, and I'm going to tell you why. Because they're usually very grumpy. They're also fat, and they usually have a resting dog bitch face on them as well, which is typically what I have most of the time. They look grumpy. So yeah, that would be me. Not just strictly because I'm British, of course, but I think it just all fits. Unless you have an alternative opinion.
I have no idea. I think this is a lovely question, but I'm very bad at these. I don't know. I mean, I know what animals I like. I mean, I'm partial to, the wolf or the shark.
Oh, are you an alpha?
I don't think that's. I'm not, because this is a fake, a pseudoscientific concept. It
is indeed, to be fair.
I'm a Sigma. I'm a Sigma dude.
Oh shit! The Sigma Doctor.
The Sigma dude. God. Okay. Yeah. Thanks everyone who has submitted questions to Second Stream over the last 2 years, and for today in particular. But I mean, this whole mode of communication and user generated conversation and topics of discussion, it's not going away, because our Discord is not going away. So like, we are still going to be like, hey, Discord people, we're talking about show X or movie Y. Hit us up with questions, and we will get a big list of questions from you. And so what we have started, the work that you have all done, will continue in perpetuity. So fret not.
Rackham, by the way, says he could see you as an owl.
Okay, I'll take that.
I mean, to be fair, when it comes to anime, there are very few people who can give a hoot like Doc does.
It's true. Also, the thing about what makes this perfect is owls are the sort of traditional take on them in media or whatever. The popular view of them is that they are very wise animals, often depicted as like sage-like. And my name is the subtle doctor, which would insinuate that kind of thing. But the reality is I'm very dumb. And the reality is owls are fucking stupid. They are really dumb animals. Probably one of the dumbest birds that exist.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, bless. Well, we need to get you a thinking man's bird then in that case.
The raven. But I look nothing like a raven. But ravens, crows are like super duper smart.
There we go. Forever knocking on that chamber door.
They can learn all right. They can learn all kinds of crazy things like that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
There we go. All right then. With that, I think it's a good time as any for us to move on to talking points. Oh boy, howdy.
All right.
So we've covered some good shit so far. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start off with what I think is one of the most powerful secondary messages this show has to offer. And this is something I can say based on my own personal experience as well. So let's talk about Kakihana for a bit and what happens to him in this show. Because on the first hand, like, I can think to myself, like, wow, he just kind of disappears after he's rescued, and that's really about him. Isn't that disappointing? But I actually don't mind, and I'm going to tell you why. I firstly want to also just address something I never thought of about the previous batch episodes, but one could take the fact that him getting physically assaulted, like, is secondary to, like, how much mental anguish he's suffering and how much emotional trauma he's suffering from having been betrayed like that. You could even say that one is a depiction of the other, just externalized. So to the point, though, for context, not in the final episode, but before then, Kakihana is indeed rescued, and he goes to a bridge over a river. Not to do anything like that, thankfully. But
it's not a Tanaka situation.
Thank God. He has the wedding ring still. He's managed to keep it. I don't know how he got it back, by the way, from Yano, but it doesn't matter. Who cares? The point, rather, though, is that he throws it into the water, but then goes to retrieve it. Now, I want to make two other points before about this as well. In the very same episode, we see Kabusawa's phone get thrown into water, which I thought was a very curiously congruent thing to happen in the same like 24 minutes, like the same kind of act. Because if Dobu wanted to destroy the phone, he could have done it any number of ways, like standing on it, for example. Didn't need to be thrown in the water. But I thought, interesting. Kabusawa, though, doesn't go and claim the phone back, whereas Kakihana does go and get the ring. Or at least he tries to. I don't think we ever actually see it confirmed that he gets it back, but I don't actually think that matters, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why that I think this is really, really fucking powerful. Because Kakihana has been really fucking hurt by all this. And I'm not talking about the fact that he got the shit kicked out of him.
No.
Or that he's in debt. Although one minor grievance I have is that his debt is written off in a way that might as well have made it literal from the story perspective, and it feels like it's trivialized. But that's so minor, it doesn't matter.
How's his debt written off?
No, it's not. I'm saying it's written off by the story.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see. Okay. Yeah, he just goes to debtor's prison, whatever, right?
It doesn't matter. But anyway, the point being is that he claims the ring back, and I actually really think that this is quite great because I think it shows that he is not like completely abandoned the idea of what that ring represents. And I think that's also why it's important that he doesn't, in that particular moment, flash back to Shiho specifically. It's not her that causes him to go and retrieve the ring. Like, I think he does it because he's still at least in somewhat into the idea that if not her, because of course she's really has backstabbed him, but rather like, that he's open to the idea that there will be someone else eventually. Yeah. That he's not lost, like, his faith in that. And that's, I mean, speaking for myself here as someone who for the longest time anguished over ever meeting someone, over, like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Why am I always failing? All of this sort of stuff. Like, I think without even saying a word about this, the fact that he goes back and gets it and it has nothing to do with her, at least as far, again, because there's no flashback to her in that moment. There is one in the final episode, but I think that's more him reflecting rather than thinking of her specifically. But anyway, at that specific moment, he goes back to get the ring. Like, I think that's such a beautiful moment. Like, even in that same episode, like, Odokawa says, like, you, like Kakai says, am I pathetic? And Odokawa says, you have been sent X and Y time. In a kind of,
so funny.
But what you might think, what you might think of as a pathetic moment of him going back for the ring is not because he's realized that he doesn't want to give up on the concept of what that ring represents. And after everything he's been through, with no other person, like no pat moment where there's some random fucking woman who just walks into his life and is into him, no bullshit like that. He has nothing but his own faith to rely on, and it still stands strong. And I'm like, that's fucking great. I love this so much. It's probably my favorite moment of the show, even though there's so much else that's great in it. Because it's so understated, but it's so like abstract and like, honestly, like really emotionally charged. And I admit that what else happens with Kakihana after that feels like, again, like I say, like, oh, he has a debt problem, but doesn't matter. I mean, I also find the idea of him working this other job like a bit strange, because I was thinking of all things, Welcome to NHK, because the lead character in that, Sato, also works a similar job where he's doing construction at the end, having come from a financial situation of nothing as a hikikomori. But like, Kakihana was working as a janitor where he was cleaning toilets, and now he's working this heavy labor job. That's still an improvement. Like, it doesn't feel like he's, I don't know, it just felt like a strange sideways move, really, to show him.
I thought he went to jail. I thought he was in debtor's prison. And he was like breaking a rock. You know what I mean?
Shit, that didn't even occur to me, but I just thought it was just like a different job he'd moved to.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he said on the phone. It's like, I can't come to the sauna because I've got a second job. Maybe he was just lying. I don't know.
Who knows? But for me, the culmination of his journey and the reaffirmation of his hope that he will like find someone someday, like in that moment with the ring, is the best moment in the show by far. And it does it without saying a single fucking word. Bravo to that. Bravo to giving him such a send-off. And bravo to, the fact that it doesn't want to try and have pat conclusions to it. I honestly think it's the best part by a long shot.
have to sneeze.
Bullshit.
Oh,
that's what Doc was doing, and he was like, bullshit.
No. I think
I'm kidding.
That was well put. I mean, yeah, I love that scene, and it's sort of the other side of the coin to what we were talking about earlier, like characters whose idea of like follow your dream at any cost, like how that like pushes them to these really bad places. I think this is like actually really kind of sweet and life affirming in some ways.
It
right?
really
and
is.
Really, I don't know, just good. It was such a cool moment. And I really love that for him. I thought, yeah, it would have been like so kind of, I mean, you would understand it if he just threw the ring away. But I mean, the fact that that he couldn't let go of it, that he went to retrieve it. And also he's not just thinking about Shiho, like you said, it's more of, just the idea of finding love. And then he doesn't, pawn that thing because he could probably sell that shit and have money to pay off his debt, you would think. But no, he does not do that. So yeah, I mean, that was really excellent. Were you satisfied with the Shiho's the end? It just kind of nothing else really happened.
I mean, we learned what I suspected, which were, or rather, had reconfirmed what I suspected, which was that she does genuinely like the idea of like having a proper bath because of her own living conditions when she was younger, and that she was teased for all that, and that in turn leads to like how going against the idea of nuance in this show, where she did lie to Kakiana, but she weaponized the truth against him as well, which is arguably worse than lying, depends how you want to put it like that. But I think we have to be fair though and say not every character can get the same level of treatment. It's
of course,
I mean,
of course, and I'm not saying I want her to be. The girl needs to be punished. Like, no. I don't want to come across like that. I guess like just sort of, yeah. I forgot that scene that you mentioned though that sort of revealed that her motivations for playing the Badger games, even though she felt kind of icky about it. Like it was still motivated by like, okay, I want to get rich. So people won't make fun of me anymore. I want to achieve, the American dream in Japan. I mean, make it big time.
I mean, we then also have to talk about how, like what we said with Kabusawa being victimized, even though he himself is abusing other people, Shio in turn is also victimized because let's be honest here, like the only person we ever see her take out in one of these Badger games is Kakiana, and his biggest crime is being naive. But he otherwise worships the ground that she walks on.
Mm-hmm.
I can absolutely and unwillingly imagine an alternative scenario where she is instead with someone else who is, well, do you want to, I'm sure you are listening at home or on the bus, wherever you might be, can imagine all kinds of horrific situations they might put her in. Or even going beyond this, like the fact that, it turns out that she instead is predated on by someone else rather than her being the predator, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
What else might people be running Mystery Kiss ask of her in the future? Oh, we're just going to film a video with this guy. And you can then think of what might be in that video and all the horrific shit that follows from that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just do the one. What's the problem? Oh, there's now two guys here. Do you want me to go on? I think I'll leave it there.
Right. So, right. And then, like, I mean, not everyone would respond as charitably as Kakihana did to being played. You can see some violent repercussions.
I honestly think is when you speak of like the idea of the character endings, I think the only one I found like again a bit disingenuous was perhaps Kabusawa's. But again, you also said like that. I mean, as I suggested, and this is what made me think of it, was like, well, actually, it's not going to be solved immediately. But I think perhaps rather my problem with the ending is just more that, well, it's something I'll get into in a minute. But anyway, but no, I think that it's one of those things where I mean, this show does such a magnificent job of giving characters the amount of screen time they get anyway. So even if I might say, for example, that Kakihara basically disappears and his story ends with the bridge scene and everything else that follows afterwards is kind of moot, that's not a bad thing because he had a complete arc. A complete arc that ended, as we noticed, in the reaffirmation of his faith in meeting the love of his life, and all the promises that follow from that. And even with Shio, like, we get to see how she's part of the exploited like class. Like, it's the idol industry has so much of people just inside the confines of its own like business demands, but then also it asks more of them sometimes, and that's when it's like even beyond like all the like exploitative work practice, that's when it truly becomes vile and disgusting. So yeah, I overall think that pretty much every character got a solid ending. I think the only other thing I would say is perhaps that Tanaka getting away scot-free was a bit weird, and also the fact that he's just suddenly gone back to normal. I mean, we said about Kabusawa like going in, Kabusawa like still going to the viral stuff made sense, but Tanaka like he was on death's door, and now he's just back.
Very far gone.
I mean, I get the idea like of them showing that he's back in the office he was originally in. It's the same framing as when he was in it in his full flashback. So I like that, but it just kind of happens. And I think it ties into my complaint about Kakihana's debt problem, where it's not the serious thing it otherwise really should be. I mean, we were talking before, like, about, how he could pawn that ring off. And I'd actually like to see the scene in which someone suggests that to him and he says, no, you know what? I made a mistake, but this wasn't a mistake, and that's why I'm not giving something to that effect. Maybe not something that sounds quite so, like, corny or whatever, but you get the idea of what I'm referring to there.
Mm-hmm.
And this, by the way, is me basically addressing with one other thing that I need to mention, why I don't think I can give these episodes a flawless mark, because I think it doesn't
you
quite...
You got to get to that. You got to get to that in your review. You got to save that for your end.
That's true. That's true. So I'll hold off now. Anyway, over to you, Doc. Do you have a talking point?
Yeah. Do you think that it was a cheat to either depict the characters as animals without Odokawa around to perceive them, or not have Odokawa in every scene? Like, basically, I mean, they just like everyone was just animals, and that was how it was, and it wasn't even many scenes where Odokawa doesn't even know the characters exist, let alone is not present in the scene.
Well, is this the point where I throw out another galaxy brain theory?
Oh, please do.
So what if everything that happened between Odokawa first drowning and when he wakes up in the actual hospital is a coma dream? Is a coma dream?
I hate it. Please, thanks. I hate it. Go away, Dallas.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist.
Terrible.
The honest answer I have to give is I think that you can just basically say there was no way they were getting around that without giving away the twist early. And I'm willing to allow it given the rhetorical trick it plays I mentioned earlier, because I think that's far more important than consistency. And the only other explanation I could possibly give to be charitable is that this is Odokawa, like, it's framed in some way as his retelling of all the events. So he was told afterwards about everything that happened. Although that admittedly does not account for the flashbacks that he could not possibly have the access to the internal monologue of, especially when it comes to Rui, for example, because she's in fucking prison. Or Tanaka, for example. So I think we're just going to have to be charitable here and say they were damned if they do, and they were damned if they were damned a little bit if they did, but they were damned more if they didn't.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, that was a question that I asked that didn't necessarily reflect my own point of view, right? Like, I agree wholeheartedly that the I don't even want to call it the trick. I was going to call it the narrative trick, but the narrative value of maintaining the illusion despite him not being present is enough, more than enough, I think, to justify doing it that way, or everything that offers the show that we already talked about previously.
Indeed. Right. So my next talking point is I want to talk about the synergy of revelations of fakeness that happen in the last couple of episodes, because there's so many different things that are revealed in quick succession to be fake, whether they're characters or whether they are, items. We, of course, have all of the fake money. That's one element of it, which Yano finds fake. Yano's own performance is revealed to be a fake because he drops it under a moment of stress.
Yano-san, you're not rhyming.
Yeah, he calls out the other Diamond Brother as a fake cop because he doesn't ultimately stick to his guns on that. And then there's also there's others I had in my mind, but they just kind of slipped. But basically, the show at this point is peeling away all the elements of fakeness, and this is the point where I get to quote Shakespeare of all things. Would you believe? So. In Hamlet, there is a quite famous line. It goes like this: "For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ." Now, there is murder in Odd Taxi, for sure, but I'm actually taking this as a more broad point where it's about the idea of deception and fakery, and lies will eventually reveal themselves, despite the intentions of others. I mean, that goes down to explaining what happens with Dobu and the fact that he had the eraser on him and everything like that. Sorry, not Dobu, Odakawa. But
can you believe Dobu was Ditch 11?
No, he wasn't. Shirakawa was, and I reckon he inherited her account.
Wait a minute, how she was? How do you? I thought the portrait wasn't the portrait a silhouette of him?
It was, but if Shirakawa could have put that portrait of him as in the way that partners might have portraits of someone else or something.
Well, how do you figure it was her? Did they say that?
Maybe they traded accounts. Because bear in mind that she also had the eraser, and Dobu said that he gave that to her. I honestly thought that it was her, and then
he handed it to her. But Ditch 11 is the one who bid on it, so he would have had to been Ditch 11.
You're right.
To do the bidding and get it originally, right?
I hadn't put that 100,000 yen, that 100,000 yen together, but you're 100% correct. But anyway, in the end, I think the show does a great job of having all of these elements of faith, even the idea of mystery kiss, and everyone having their masks off, some of them wear masks, and they're now gone, because Sakura reveals herself in the end.
Yeah, I mean, and Yuki, exactly. Yuki Mitsuya is a fake Yuki Mitsuya.
It's
this other person.
All elements of fakery, as far as the show presents, even through sheer coincidence, will dissolve in time. It is just a matter of waiting, coincidence, circumstance, you name it. And that's why I quoted that Hamlet line there, because it again speaks to that idea. In the end, all will be revealed, whether you wish it to or not.
Right. Be sure your sins will find you out, says, I think that's Proverbs. I can't remember. But
so, yeah, that's that I thought was great, that how it just tied all those different disparate elements in there, where it all just peeled it back. Pretty good. Pretty damn good.
Yeah. I mean, everything, God, the last few episodes are so good.
They were. Do you have anything else to add, Doc? Any other talking points?
Are you satisfied with the Satoshi Nagashima character, and introduced relatively late? Do you remember who this is?
Remind me.
The giraffe.
Oh yes.
Not everything can be a home run.
the ultimate answer I have to this is that because the Homo sapiens, we don't see them go their separate ways, to the point where he does end up partnering with that kid. That ultimately, I think that should have happened. I think that there should have been Homo sapiens 2.0, where we get to see him partner with a kid, and maybe it works out better, maybe it doesn't. But he's at least open to the idea of moving on to new things because of this current thing. Sorry. By the way, the one other element of fakeness I forgot to mention in my previous point was the the competition where the comedians, the Homo sapiens, argue on stage again. All pretense falls away in the end.
That's right. Yeah.
Even that ties into it. Is it juggling too many balls then? Because but the thing is, I'm willing to accept it, willing to just roll with it, because these characters who get the relative little screen time they get are also afforded relatively little importance by the story as well.
There have to be minor characters, you know.
In such a way that, like, you know, their screen time and the amount of attention the show wants us to give them feel simpatico of each other. They feel like they're aligned.
Yeah.
But one might also then argue that would it have been such a loss if the giraffe kid had not been there at all, given that the conflict between the Homo sapiens is amongst themselves, and there is no then follow-up to say, like, I've now found my other partner, the giraffe kid, and we're doing great. You know, maybe we learn the hard lesson that as performers, we are not actually suited to each other, despite you get the idea. But,
yeah.
I mean, it's a missed opportunity, but I'd be fucking flummoxed if you asked me to where I'd fit that in.
That's the thing, is like there have to be minor characters. I don't hold this against the show, like, and I think, like, you know, he has a presence in the show, like early on, just like as the fan writing in letters to these two. So he's really in it from the beginning, but like, everything, you know, about him is in service of Shibagaki and Baba. So like, no, I mean, I think this is fine. I mean, not every character, you know, you have your Sekaguchis and Nagashimas, right? And your Cannons. She's the news anchor. And your kangaroo bartender ladies, you know, who, you know, they're there to facilitate the other characters, and that's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Yeah. What? Shoot. Oh, do you have any other talking points?
I do. I have one more to make.
I also have one more.
Just the one. I want to talk very quickly about Yuki and Sakura. And this is another element of where the animals actually plays a really powerful part in making this point, because they are both the exact same animal species, which is a cat, if I recall, a black one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but ultimately they are the same species and look identical.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not a pointed dig at the disposability of idols and how quickly they've been replaced by others, then I don't know what it is.
Amazing.
Because no one really notices the difference and no one cares. And it
only
really
the big fanboys, but they don't care enough to like make a fuss about it. Because it might notice, but like he was too smitten with Rui. And the CDs and being a part of it and everything.
Well, the thing is, they had a press conference as well where they said, like, you know, oh yeah, this band member's dead and we've replaced with a new one. And I mean, that ties into the fact that no one gave a shit about finding her originally to begin with, or whatever, you know. Like, it, you know, they are disposable commodities and can very easily be replaced by someone else, and it really just makes it seem as shallow as it otherwise probably is. And I thought that's a great way of getting just a little extra mileage out of the animal thing to make the cogent point that, hey, idols are disposable and replaceable. And, you know, so fucking what? I mean, Raka mentions that one is taller, but as far as the distinction between the two of them, it doesn't seem all that meaningful relative to the fact they otherwise look identical.
Yeah, I mean, at least when it's exposed, that's the end for Mystery Kiss. Like, it becomes a scandal, and, you know, that's sort of the beginning of the end. And then Rui turns herself in, and it's all over. You know, the Fuyuki goes away anyway as part of Yano's criminal enterprise. But I mean, I think at that point, I mean, they were so worried about it coming to light for that reason. So at least like once the press gets a hold of it, you know, it's not just totally moot point. But it is interesting that there are people who like deep down in their gut, they know that this is a different person.
Oh, that reminds me. Can we talk about Imai's? Because I mentioned I was going to talk about him actually. Can we talk about his response to Rui's arrest and imprisonment?
Yeah,
that he still ultimately is going to support her.
It's like a gift that she's in prison. It's like, yeah, this is a whole new experience.
Oh my god! I hope that phone on the other side of that glass comes with an off switch. Shit. Well, the point I was going to ask though was
still has a fan club.
What do we make of Imai in this situation? Because I can't decide if I think that, you know, he ultimately because even though like Mystery Kiss ultimately was like, a corrupt front for Badger Games and murder and all that other sordid shit.
Murder. Yes.
And all that other sordid shit.
Mm-hmm.
Even what's his name? The Jackal dude, who was running
yes.
it. Yeah, he actually wanted it to go legit.
Yeah, he gave a shit. He really cared about it.
Yeah, and in turn, one must then say, if he can see the genuine value in it, can we ultimately say that Imai's like affection for the group is completely wasted? There was something in there that he likes about them. Is that suddenly taken away or voided because of what the group turned out to be? Is the idea of Mystery Kiss that was presented the one that both he and Thingy, Jackal Kid, whatever his fucking name is, Fuyuki, thank you, were both like looking towards from different angles? Like, is that still valid? Is it still worthwhile? Or is he deluded? Is he not seeing things as they are? I mean, it's ironic that he's telling this also to Odokawa, who has just now, for the second time in the show, started seeing things as they are again. But there are some people who still maintain their delusions. But is that such a bad thing? Welcome to Odd Taxi, nuanced discussion, bitch. It's just crazy.
It's good. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And the thing is, like, I think there's
conclusions.
Yeah, with Imai, in that case, like, I don't think there's a heavy weighting one way or the other. Like, if you argue that, for example, that he is deluded and wrong to be still interested in Rui as a person or as an idol or whatever you want to call it, I can't disagree with you. But I conversely can't disagree with those who would argue that, as I say, that the genuine value behind Mystery Kiss, the thing that had him interested in the first place, still has meaning and worth. And that's why it's okay for him as long as he doesn't do something stupid like give her all of his fucking money. Like, that's fine. Like, I can't argue either way because both are entirely valid viewpoints. God, but hey, there we are, I guess. So yeah.
Okay, I've happened upon evidence that Mao is a piece of shit and a bad website.
Oh, do you mean like the time when it was all into Nazi stuff? I remember that.
This could be worse. All right.
Oh no. What's worse than Nazis? Pray tell.
I'm gonna lay it out for you.
Pray tell.
Sakaguchi, the polar bear character.
Yep.
You know how many favorites? How many people have him listed as their favorite character?
I'm going to assume the answer to that is too many.
No, not necessarily. What? It's 3. 3 people have Sakaguchi. Seems appropriate to me. Sakaguchi, okay. Very minor thug character as a polar bear. Satoshi Nagashima, the giraffe. You know how many people have Satoshi Nagashima, the giraffe, as a favorite character?
I'm assuming that's 2.
3. The same number.
Okay, same number.
You know how many people have Rui Nikaido, an incredibly interesting, nuanced, fascinating, cool character as their favorite character?
0.
3. The same number of people that have Sakaguchi. Have Nagashima as their favorite character.
They're going to turn out to be profiles of people. They're going to turn out to be profiles of the character of people role playing the characters. This is one giant circle jerk.
More really people have Kabusawa as their favorite character.
I guess they didn't learn the lesson then of watching the show, or maybe just didn't watch the show at all.
4 people, and I mean, I don't care about the morality. I mean, like, Dobu's a cool character. I understand 27 people have him as their favorite. Nikaido's great. She's a great character. She's a better character. I mean, like, not, of course, morally speaking. I think she's a more interesting character than Shirakawa. And Shirakawa has 46 favorites.
I'd be wary of sample size
3.
in this. I'd be wary of sample size in this, though, Doc, to be fair. Because, I mean, I'm sure if you found, like, what people's most favorite characters, they'd have some... I mean, I'm sure 02 is up there, and we all remember how that fucking went.
Yes. But these are the people that watched On Taxi, though. I'm just saying...
Well, the thing is, those 3 people who like Kabusawa as their favorite character clearly did not watch Odd Taxi. Because of uncritical veneration of a character who literally was the subject of uncritical veneration.
I mean, But maybe it's critical veneration. I mean, but he's just nowhere near.
He's my favorite character, and I hate him. I want to strangle him with all my love. I want to shake him by the shoulder and say, I like you, but I think you're a twat.
Exactly. I mean, I feel the same about Nikaido. Like, not that I want to call her that name, but just like, she's not a cool person. You don't want to hang out with her. But as a character, she's amazing. To be fair, Otokawa has 718 favorites. So, and Yano has 181. I mean, who wouldn't love a rapping porcupine?
There's actually, I think, a shipping fandom between Yano and the polar bear guy I've seen on Twitter a couple of times.
Interesting.
And I'll just put my opinion on the table here. I am in no position to judge anyone's ships. Well, I say that, but I'm sure there's probably some I could judge who presented them, but I'll leave that for another time. I just don't see it myself, but hey, that's just me.
Okay, my last talking point here is a lot of stuff got dunked in the water in the final episode, but even before that. And I think that that's interesting and worth looking at. I mean, I think some stuff that got dunked in the water was pulled back out again and changed, sort of a baptism, you might say. Mm-hmm. And some stuff simply drowned and sunk to the bottom, and was never to be seen again. You know, the bath salts, the body, all kinds of things in that last episode, the car. But then you have Otokawa, who's twice kind of reborn after being plunged in the river. And you have, I think, symbolically Kakihana's ring. Like, really fascinating if you think the ring is, as an object, is like a stand-in for his kind of dreams and belief in love, and that he will find someone to be with, that like that was kind of born anew and just will kind of take him in a different direction, and it won't manifest in the same way in his life. And so I think that there are some really, some just interesting parallels and points of comparison and juxtaposition about how you could see a lot of different things as sort of being baptized, and then other things as, you know, drowning and disappearing in the water.
I mean, for a lot of times, water in this show is the thing that cleanses, impurities and lets everything run clear. Unfortunately for Otokawa, it just happened to be that when he, stopped being a walrus as a result of it, he didn't, he's seen himself as a walrus all this time, but he unfortunately did not have the lung capacity of one. So, well, never mind. Bit unfortunate that. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like the show is consistent in its use of it, and it is the thing that changes things. I mean, or rather, like, even when people try to throw things like the body in there, it still comes back. Like,
right.
So yeah, it is the consistent element of, like, cleansing things, making things seem as they really are, bringing things up from under the surface. That's a part of, like, what happens with water as well, when things float to the top.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
right.
yeah, 100%, 100% agree.
She does come back up. Yeah.
Indeed. Even
the bath salts don't.
Well, yeah. I mean,
but the money does. The money comes up clean.
Even it literally does come up clean, because no longer has it been tainted by criminal enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. There you go. I don't know how Imai got all of that back, admittedly, but, well, giant net.
How
that's my
was
guess.
Saved, right? I mean, they collected it.
Giant net is basically my guess.
A blow dryer.
God, yeah. But anyway, I'm done on talking points. Do you have any more to add, Doc, or is that all of it?
I mean, I don't think I have any more on this set. I guess we'll say more in our reviews of the show and such.
Yeah, oh boy, we're big on those. I mean, the only thing I'll add is just that Shirakawa actually kicking.
Oh, it's so good. I love that. It's a great.
That was great. I also really like one small detail I noticed is when she kicked in the taxi window, which we don't actually see. Like when you see her in the hospital later when she's in human form, you actually see that she's got a cast around her leg from where she kicked it. And that is such a ridiculous attention to detail for something I never otherwise would have. Like it could have just been normal. I wouldn't have noticed, but I'm like, holy shit, that's amazing. It's literally bottom right of the frame, and I'm like, wow, someone thought to put that in. That is impressive. Because I don't think anyone would have noticed or necessarily cared all that much if they hadn't. I don't think you'd have had like the plot hole police going in and say, "Well, why is a foot okay?" Like no one would have fucking cared realistically, unless your cinema sins, who I mentioned before, grifting bastards that they are. But anyway, but yeah, I'm otherwise all done on the talking points. So let's get on to reviewing this block of episodes first and foremost. So I again have to be upfront here. I'm not going to rate this as a perfect set of episodes because as I say, there's a couple of things that mildly let it down for me. I mean, like the fact that some characters' arcs don't feel fully complete, or like, and they are all the minor characters ultimately. Like, I mean, all the major characters get the full fat delivery that they deserve. The fact that Odokawa's like thing is solved in such a way feels a little hack. The other thing that felt a little hack to me was just how everyone seemed to be in the exact same vicinity at the very end, where they could all see Odokawa's flying taxi. I mean, I know the show is about coincidences.
Oh, that was the airport chase that we were begging for. Everyone showed up to interact with each other in the last moment. Everyone, you know, had the car chase, and then everyone else in the vicinity. That's just like the Coen Brothers trope, isn't it?
I don't know. Like, I think because the show was so much about the idea of like, you know, people being so close coincidentally to each other and all of that, you know, that just felt like it was pushing it a bit far for me, a tiny bit far though. So those are all minor blemishes though. Otherwise, on what has been a magnificently executed finale. I mean, I think above all of the other shows that we've covered on Second Stream, with the possible exception of Suritama, this is the show that has landed the strongest in. I mean, I know you and I have talked many times about sticking the landing, and yeah, you know what? The worst that happened when this show landed was someone spilt a very small amount of their drink. Oh no! As opposed to like when we've watched other shows like Listeners, which I don't think that everyone ever took off to begin with.
Was that a second stream? Oh my god!
It might not have been, but fuck it, who cares?
I thought that was I think that was our pick. Yeah, we did that to ourselves.
Yeah. Or like when we watched Kabukicho Sherlock, where we jumped out the plane halfway through and we didn't even pack a parachute because we couldn't take any more.
Thank God.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, phenomenal set of episodes, rich in detail, rich in nuance, pays off everything pretty much magnificently. Some character stories, as I say, not quite dealt with as fully as I'd have liked. The Homo sapiens are probably the most egregious example of that, just with the fucking giraffe kid, where that felt like set up and not dealt with. But all of that is so minor. But unfortunately, it is not the resoundingly perfect finale that I wish it was, but it is still damn close. For that reason, I will give Odd Taxi episodes 8 through 13 4.75 convenient erasers shaped like baboons out of 5. It was damn close, and it's still probably the most consistently rated show that we've covered on Second Stream, if not the current format across all of our pods, basically. Very few shows, I think. I mean, if this is the point where I have to rate the entire show, like I said before at the very start, I don't know if this will have much sticking power in terms of like I'm going to rewatch it. It's going to like stick in mind, like to the point where I'll start buying stuff for it. Like I have Land of the Lustrous over there, for example. I have been like that's the kind of thing that sets it apart. Me, I don't think that'll work for me. But it is now the gold standard to which I will hold every anime that we cover from here on out accountable to in terms of storytelling, because they cared about the script. They cared about the thing that I care about. Yeah, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to be biased in my opinion here. I'm not going to be all that fussed about animation, because if we look at the animation, whatever. No one gives a shit about the animation in this show, in my opinion, and I don't think anyone really fucking cares. But that's not the point, though.
The capoeira is animated very well.
Okay, yes, and the intro was pretty cool as well. Let's be fair.
Oh, the intro rules. Yeah, the OP is great.
The OP is fucking sick. But that is, as I say, like, you know, this will be the gold standard now. Because if this show can do it for a story that is fundamentally just a mystery story about a bank heist and everything else that surrounds it, like, I don't see any reason other shows can't. Like, I don't see any reason that people cannot put this kind of care and attention to it where they actually treat it as a work of art rather than a commercial product to be shat out first and foremost. So yeah, I overall will give Odd Taxi the same rating that I gave these Final Blocks episodes, which is 4.75. Walrus Taxis out of 5. It is damned close to being a flawless execution of its own concept and premise, and the only things that stop it, in my opinion, as I say, are just the small little niggles at the end. But if we compare this to, say, Decadence, for example, where the ending was just complete and utter wet fart relative to its previous content.
It was a letdown. I wouldn't say a complete. It was not like a crash and burn. It was a little bit of a letdown.
I'm probably being histrionic there, I admit, but it's certainly, in relative degree sense, this was a much more comfortable conclusion because it pretty much delivered everything it set out to do.
Oh, yeah.
And for that, I absolutely applaud it. I'm also feeling 99% confident it will be the best thing I've seen all year. The other contenders for what were going to be the best shows I've seen this year that were released this year were Wonder Egg, excepting this bonus episode. I'm compartmentalizing that elsewhere.
Talk about something that died a death at the end.
Oh yeah, that was like the rotten egg amongst it. You crack it open, you just knock yourself out.
Not what anybody
wanted. Yourself on the side.
I don't think it's what anybody wanted. Yeah.
So yeah, I would still consider the rest of Wonder Egg to be noteworthy, despite its incredibly exploitive production experience. Beside the point, and the other one that was in contention for me was probably Dyna-Zenon. But Odd Taxi is just above both of them.
What about it? Really is just a simple shoujo. Is it?
Well, I'm considering strictly stuff that I've seen for this pod. And I like Higeki Shoujo. I like Higeki Shoujo a lot. I think it's a great show. But I wouldn't. If I were to put it in a ranking, I would probably consider it a notch below Wonder Egg when it was not shit, and Dyna-Zenon, which still makes it pretty great. So yeah. That's my review for Odd Taxi. At the end, it's fucking magnificent. And why the fuck have you been listening to this podcast if you've not already watched it? What's wrong with you? You fool.
Yuki said he gives a shit about the animation.
That's fair. But I'm having my cake and eating it here, where I'm just like, hey, finally, someone's finally listened to me and put the majority of their attention, if you could quantify it as such, into the script first. Thank fuck for that.
Yeah, it's interesting how this is such a, it's kind of a unique circumstance in some ways. Although interestingly enough, one of the other things we're doing, Sunny Boy, is very much the same thing, where a studio is just here, Shingo-san, do your thing, and getting to do his thing. And this just seems like a similar kind of a collab that was about the storytelling, and was for a very kind of, I don't know, it knew what audience it wanted to hit. There were it wasn't trying to be to feed the database animal, I don't think, if you will. Yeah. So, what did I think about the show? This block of episodes, I agree with your rating. I'm going to give it, I think we've been aligned every step of the way this time. I'm going to give it 4 3/4.
You were like, oh, you can't give a perfect rate, but you're not doing a perfect rating either. I see what you did there. Very good, very good.
What did I do? What?
You were giving me a little gentle ribbing as we went along about not giving it a perfect rating.
Yeah.
and then you pull the fast one on me by also doing the same.
Yep.
Oh, you subtle doxer, you.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I suppose why I marked this set as slightly lower, I don't know. It may have had something to do with the way I watched it. It could be just that inherently the way things play out is not as interesting as when there's a possibility space open and so many different things can happen, and it's really kind of lighting your brain up. I do think the show lost a little bit of momentum in some ways around about episode 11, 10 or so. I like it felt like that. I don't know. I mean, it's hard because I don't want to be like, hey, show, don't do that thing where you devote a big chunk of time to one character, because I really liked that. But at the same time, it's like when an episode is not hitting everyone like some of the earlier episodes did, and you're discovering everything, and there's just a real density there, and again, a real sense of possibility. It just felt like it just lost a little bit for me, momentum wise. But I mean, this is just such a minor thing. I mean, to say it's not absolute perfection, right? I mean, it's like such a, I don't know. I don't want to be negative about it at all, because I think it's a marvelous production. I mean, I think everything about it is executed so well. This block of episodes I'll stick with. I mean, it pretty much keeps up to par. Par being 5 out of 5, which is like it just a shade below. So I mean, it doesn't do anything egregiously wrong. I think it sticks the landing, like you said. I think, I mean, it doesn't like short shrift any really important characters or storylines. Very satisfying and totally rewatchable for me. I think I'm going to give the show overall, though. I'll give the overall show a 5. Just in terms of on balance. I think it deserves that like 9.5 or 10 out of 10. Like, because I just think it's a real achievement in terms of writing. It is impeccably written show, and I mean, I don't think all anime are going to put the focus here, because not all anime are made for us, right?
No, it's true.
And not all anime are concerned with being art first. You gotta subsidize your studio in some ways, so you gotta make the products. And that's okay. That stuff is just not for us a lot of the time. But man, this really was for us. Like, goodness me, the writing and the characterization and the storytelling, the pacing, the plotting. Everything was just really felt planned out. Nothing felt rushed or wasted. It didn't feel like they got to the end too soon and then there was an episode left where they just fucked around, or they didn't get to the end and have to rush everything in the last half an episode, or release a fucking special 3 months later because they didn't finish it.
Oh Christ, yeah.
Like it was really well planned thing. And I gotta give it the highest marks for that. So satisfying, so nuanced, so thematically rich. It's like a multi-layer chocolate cake, just rich cake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, delicious, wonderful show.
Yeah. I should probably clarify when I say about focus on writing. I mean, I'm not expecting every show that ever gets made to have this level of complexity. Some stories need only be simple, and some, but I think that there's kind of like a theoretical ceiling of attention each story demands, depending on its complexity. And then there's, of course, what you actually give to that story. I mean, to go back to Decadence, I mentioned before, there was a theoretical ceiling, and it came like within spitting distance, well, not spitting distance, but it came close to it, but didn't quite reach it. Whereas Odd Taxi is probably the closest between the two that I've seen in an anime in quite some time. That's what I mean by putting in your
Decadence was so incredible.
Yeah, and that's why I bring all of that up, because I think that what I mean to say is I want as much effort as is reasonable to go into a given work, depending on what it is demanding and offering. Like, if it's just a simple like shonen story that doesn't demand a whole lot of complex writing or planning, fine, it doesn't need that. But it demands like a certain amount, and you should strive to meet that. As much as I say this like about quantifying this sort of thing when it's really kind of nebulous, but I hope that that's clear by what I mean by where basically really, like, if you're doing stuff like Decadence, really give it some fucking thought. or Wonder Egg for that matter, because as much as I think Wonder Egg is a good show if you ignore its rotten 13th episode, like bullshit special episode, there are many problems with it still. Problems that could have been solved with foresight and planning. But that is not something one associates with Wonder Egg, because that show was literally being made in such a production schedule as it was putting people in the hospital twice. So,
I don't think that 13th episode, it was valueless, but like, boy, it made some really shitty writing decisions. And then like, who looked at that and was like, yes, this is the conclusion we've been striving to. This is like what people want. Like, just such a terrible way to go out.
I honestly would have preferred if the creators of the show had just egged my house instead.
The real Wonder Egg. Also, Rackham found me out in chat and said the real reason I took off a quarter star was because they turned out not to be real animals. So you got me, Rackham.
You got bang to rights. There we go. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion of Odd Taxi in that case then, but we're going to have a little bit of a swan song for Second Stream before we go, because it has been quite the 2 years doing this format, doing the various shows we've covered. I was actually looking for our Patreon before at the shows that we had covered as a part of this, and it has been quite the ride. We've covered some real gems on this, I will say, though. Like, we had Suritama, for example, which was just phenomenally great. Decadence, for all that it kind of flummoxed the ending a little bit, was still spectacular in its own right.
Yeah.
Or even stuff like Julia Richard, which still sticks in my mind. Like, that was just its very... Yeah, it's its own unique little gem, that, literally.
It was a gem, yeah.
And then we had Kabukicho Sherlock, and Jesus Christ. But
Given,
I will have...
Right? Was Given second stream? I think it was. I think this is before Deshou the Third existed. I think Given was our second show.
It might have been, in which case, well, if Given... I think it might potentially have been Streamer 4, actually. I'm not sure, though. But anyway, what I will, however, end this note on is this. Like, we've run the gamut of quality covering stuff on Second Stream, but I think that's a good thing. I don't think, like, the criticism is well served by focusing strictly on good stuff or bad stuff, conversely. I mean, we said that as much about, I think, when we were covering Kabukicho Sherlock, where we were like, someone nees to cover this shit and point out that it's fucking terrible. And was literally written by fucking TERFs. It really was. It really was.
Really bad.
Yeah. But like, we've covered the gamut of all of that stuff, and if there's one thing I want to do going forward is continue to cover the gamut. We'll do the bad stuff and we'll do the good stuff.
Listen, we are gonna do some bad stuff.
Oh, we're gonna cover some right shit. Some absolute tripe.
This is gonna be the return of some bullshit. Let me tell you, I'm excited. We have not, like, apart from the occasional, like, watch along, we haven't really dissected some awfulness in a few. It's been a few years, and I'm quite honestly champing at the bit to do so.
Oh gosh, I'm going to be yelling a lot again, I suspect. But I will say this, though, like, for all the run of the gamut of quality that we've had on Second Stream, to end it on Odd Taxi and end on a high note really feels pretty damn good, I must say. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to do this particular format for 2 years, in which people were willing to give us money to hear our opinions on. For that, wow. To you, listener at home, whether you're doing it on the free or whether you're one of our patrons before we close it down, thank you so much for your time and attention, and the value of your time, for that matter, as well, if you're paying us for it. I have little more to add other than just my humility before you for affording us this opportunity and having interest in what we have to say. I'd also be remiss, by the way, if I didn't mention our gratitude for the podcast we've had on, such as Emily Rand, all the people who've added amazing perspectives to it, and just good times and good banter. And that is ultimately the note I will end on, which is the good times, the good banter, and the good points will continue in one form or another, even if Second Stream ultimately now comes to an end. But on that note, Doc, thank you very much also, of course, for being a part of all this throughout all of it.
Listen, you're very welcome. Boy, it's kind of surreal. I mean, the Patreon idea, I don't know. I'd wanted to do it like for a little while before we did it, like maybe a year before we brought it out, and you know, talked about it with you and Vorg, and it was like, maybe we're not quite ready, but then we were, and then we pushed it through, and we got more support than I think most projects on Patreon get. I mean,
I was stunned.
It's really, really cool. And we met a lot of great people, and, you know, people willing to financially, you know, contribute to the show and to the community. And like, I mean, it's really cool. Like, this is a bad show because I'm not a good podcaster, but I'm so happy that we got to do what we got to do with the users, with the friends, with the patrons, the listeners. That they contributed with the questions, that they got to pick the shows, that they trusted us to pick the shows, like Given, like
oh yeah,
you know, Jula Richard and other things. Like, I mean, it's just been such a pleasure. And like you said, I mean, we got like Emily Rand and Anthony Gramuglia and all kinds of like cool people to talk about these shows with. And you know, the format's been evolving, and we've been trying to figure out what works, and it's changing here. But you know, but the Patreon will close down, but I mean, we're still gonna keep going. We're gonna fade out to We're the Champions. I wish I had that queued up. I'm not that smart of a producer. Also, we would get copyright flagged, so we can't do that. but
sorry,
that was such a good impression that they're going to copyright flag us. So damn you!
Just can't win, can you? God damn it.
But there's you know like the good things about this are not going to go away. I just want to emphasize that like
yes,
you know, the community will still be here. People will still be able to get in. I mean, we are still going to have Ko-fi as a way that you can support us if you want to. You know, it won't be like the sort of backer rewards system. You know, it's not going to be a subscription kind of thing, just because our lives are just taking on more and more. Like, we're getting busier, and we're going to scale back the quantity of content so we can tweak up the quality without also having to like just juggle also extra content that we feel obligated to do to backers that we've promised you. So there will be a way to support us. There is the Ko-fi page is up if you want to. That could even be a way for people to get into Discord. Ko-fi can lock into Discord, so we could do basically the thing that we've been doing, where, you know, if people donate, then they can become part of Yuki-non. God damn it. You're gonna make me cry. You're such a sweetheart. But podcast is not over. It's not. We're still gonna have the Discord can still grow, and hopefully like more people will listen, because we can just put our stuff out there immediately without the paywall and without the delay. And it can be like it was in the Banana Fish days, where we just like put that shit out and people were like, hey, here's a review of Banana Fish right away. And here's, you know, it's cool. That was such a fun time. And
I was.
You know, I look forward to all the kinds of things that we're going to cover. I mean, we're going to cover really good anime, shitty anime, cool movies, shitty movies, like all
really
kinds of fun stuff. I mean, like maybe we can even, you know, I think you and I are gonna do the selections, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we can have kind of a, you know, 1 month, you know, have a user pick month or something. We don't know. We'll
work it out. We'll work it out. We'll be open to suggestion. But as Doc has rightly pointed out, though, the show, never mind it must going on, it is going to go on, just in a different format. We'll share more in the coming weeks about what format that will take and when we'll start doing it. But we're not quite done yet with our current format in general. We do have one more Deshou the Third to go on the finale of Death Parade, which I hope will not be like stale bathwater like the previous batch of episodes.
And the stream of thought, the Sunny Boy.
Yeah, a full batch of Sunny Boy episodes, 7 of them, I think,
so
covered
much.
a single go. Which, I mean, with it being Sunny Boy, that's all the extra challenge on that. Like, that's going to be quite the thing to see. This
brain is going to be sunny
on.
side up. It's going to be fried.
You're going to be in another dimension, mate.
Yeah.
But yeah, that otherwise concludes the second stream. So thank you all again. We'll be back next week for the conclusion of Death Parade. Otherwise, wherever you are in the world, wherever you may be listening to this, whatever time of day it might be, I hope you're taking care of yourself, your loved ones, and your friends and family. From myself and Doc here, all the best in the world to you all. And as we often say on this podcast, embrace everyone. See you in the universe. Good night.
Bring back the brothers. Do it.